Welcome to Stories with a Twang. I'm Nathan. For today's episode, I've got two exciting stories. The first story of the day is called I Broke One of Their Cardinal Rules While Using a Car Wash by Sugar Sewed. I let out a sigh of frustration as I looked at all the dirt that covered my windshield. I sprayed water and used the wipers to clean it, but unfortunately it made it worse. I was nearly home and considered washing it myself, but knew that I was too lazy to do that. I spotted a car wash ahead and decided to just bite the bullet and pay to get it cleaned. I pulled over and an old grumpy man walked over to collect my money. He told me to just drive onto the ramps and then stop. I slowly inched my car forward until I was sure that my car was in place. I noticed a sign to the right that stated, "Do not play music while car wash is operating," in big bold letters. I snorted with laughter as that was such a strange request. The car wash started and the machinery began to move my car. I turned on Spotify and Sugar by System of a Down began blaring out of my car's speakers. I began headbanging to my heart's content as I knew no one could see me. The song had just finished when I gazed in the rearview mirror to see two people sitting in my back seat. I instinctively spun around and was confused to see no one there. I faced forwards again and my heart caught in my throat as I spot the people in the mirror once again. I sat there frozen in place with my eyes fixed on the mirror. I reached up carefully and adjusted the mirror to give me a better view and almost screamed at the apparitions that I was trapped in here with. It was two girls who were both wearing identical blue dresses with a pink unicorn covering the right breast. It took all my willpower to raise my eyes and gaze at what remained of their heads. Their head ended just above their mouths, as if something had just sliced straight through it. They seemed to be smiling away with their tongues hanging out of their mouths. They seemed to be bopping away to the music, and every time they moved, their tongues moved from side to side like a pendulum clock. I tore my eyes away from the mirror and snuck my hands forward and turned off the music. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest as the suds from the car wash engulfed my car. I nearly screamed as I felt the breath touching both of my ears. I raised my eyes to the mirror to see both girls had their heads on either side of me and seemed to be scrutinizing the side of my face. I began reaching for the door handle but stopped as I saw the hot foam spray across the car. I tried not to flinch away as the girls' hands began moving across my body. They inspected every nook and cranny and I felt my bladder release as the terror overwhelmed me. The hands disappeared and I quickly breathed a sigh of relief. My relief was short-lived as their tongues began caressing my cheeks. Their tongues felt like sandpaper, and I could feel something running down my face, which I could only assume was blood. My entire body was now shaking uncontrollably as their tongues began targeting my ears. The primordial part of my brain was screaming at me to just jump out of the car, but my body was refusing to comply. I let out a moan as their tongues sunk further and further inside my ears. I was biting my own tongue to suppress a scream as the pain was unbearable. I could swear that they were licking my brain, but I know that that's not physically possible. Their tongues suddenly retracted as my car exited the car wash. I stared once more in the mirror to see the girls standing inside the car wash, waving goodbye to me. I threw open the car door and vomited out everything I had ever eaten. I tried to stand, but my feet gave way beneath me and I fell onto my own vomit. I began sobbing uncontrollably as I came to terms with everything that had just happened. The owner walked over and gave me a pitying look before pointing to the rule about playing music. I lurched to my feet and hopped into my car to get away from this godforsaken place. I had only driven a short distance when the skies opened and the rain began to blanket my car. I let out a manic laugh as I realized that if I had just waited a few minutes, then I would never have needed to wash my car as the rain would have done it for me. Now to our final story. This one is called Never Download Tinder by Max. I met Tim on Tinder. Tim was the best boyfriend I could have asked for. As a 25-year-old woman living in the heart of Seattle, I had been close to giving up on my love life. Men were scary, unreliable infidels. I believed that for a long time, at least until my friend Susie convinced me to give Tinder a try. Please, she practically begged me during brunch one day. Please just go on one date. If it sucks, I'll never bother you about it again. Drunk on margaritas and breakfast food of questionable quality, I relented. I went on one date with a man named Tim Henry. It went very well, too well even. I learned that he worked in IT and he's deadly allergic to strawberries, that his ex-wife died of breast cancer in 2013. He learned about me too, how I grew up with abusive parents and now take care of my younger brother Zach while pursuing a degree in psychology. Tim was really into true crime, and he got me hooked on it as well. The stories were harrowing, heartbreaking, disturbing, but some morbid curiosity kept us listening. We developed inside jokes, shamefully mostly revolving around cannibals and the gruesome details of specific murders. As a psych major, it was all so interesting. Obviously, those psych classes got me nowhere. I didn't see the red flags. True crime is a lot easier to listen to if you've never lived through a podcast-worthy horror story of your own. Until then, true crime is a what-if, an almost impossibility that ensures you lock your doors at night but never steals your sleep. After, it's all too real. Tim and I got married in 2019. As many married men do, he started to let himself go, let down appearances. He began to confide in me. He spoke to me about how he often had thoughts of murder, of skinning someone alive. I explained to him what intrusive thoughts were, and he seemed satisfied with that explanation. Later, he told me he had been diagnosed with harm OCD, a subcategory of OCD where the patient has obsessive and unrealistic worries about hurting other people, such as putting all your knives under lock and key so you don't kill your entire family. In reality, these patients are often even less capable of murder than the average sane person. It explained a lot of his obsessive violent thoughts. How he'd want to kill me for the smallest of infractions. I made sure to turn the lights off in the kitchen every night since he told me he wanted to rip my fingernails out the last time I forgot. I would never have admitted it, but Tim was starting to scare me. I knew it sounded awful to be afraid of someone with harm OCD, but I would come to be thankful for my paranoia. I began to keep a strawberry in my pocket. I was out with Susie on one of our regular Friday night dinners when I had forgotten the name of Tim's company. Naturally, I Googled it. Strangely enough, I couldn't find it. I couldn't find Tim at all, actually, anywhere on the internet. Even his Tinder account had been deleted. Being somewhat tech-savvy, I used an image search to scour the internet for a face match. To my horror, several matches popped up, none mentioning an IT company. The headlines blurred together in my head. I was so shocked I could barely hear Susie asking me what was wrong. I skimmed the preview, shortened and cut off by the small screen of my phone. Seattle man kills wife in brutal love story gone wrong. I found her skinned alive. A harrowing story of man charged of first-degree murder escapes Tim Fuller, a monster loose among the streets of... I got up and rushed home, leaving an equally horrified Susie in the dust. I had seen enough. I had heard enough. I needed to know the truth right then, even if it cost my life. Even if I was in danger. I loved Tim, and if he loved me, he would tell me the truth. That's what I told myself, even though he lied about having OCD, his ex-wife passing from cancer and working with IT. However, I know better now. You can't fix killers. I burst into the house and shoved my phone in Tim's face. Something in his eyes gave away the articles were not fake. I felt the world shift from under me as grief and shock dizzied my perception. The world shifted again when Tim tackled me to the ground. Everything from dinner to the second Tim snapped felt like milliseconds. I heard him screaming, but the words were too far away, too muffled to hear. Something warm spread over the back of my skull. Spots danced over my vision. My body felt cold and sensationless. I felt like a corpse long after death. Tim often told me about how his mother had suffered from severe OCD. He mentioned how he wasn't surprised he was diagnosed, as OCD tends to be genetic. I believed every word out of his mouth, especially considering I had an actual harm OCD diagnosis from early childhood, one he never had. To sum up my childhood, I had always been afraid of myself. I was afraid that if I didn't barricade my door, I would hurt my little brother in my sleep. I kept myself away from sharp objects. I didn't listen to true crime for fear I would get ideas. Eventually, I convinced myself that my fear was not based in reality, but now I know better. Maybe it was because of how my parents hurt Zach. Maybe it was how they hurt me. But deep down, I've always known I'm capable of violence. I was just afraid I would misuse it. But when I heard Zach scream, when I felt Tim's body weight shift from mine, when I saw something in his hand, smelled blood in the air, tasted copper in my mouth, I was no longer afraid. My vision cleared as I launched myself upwards, barely gaining complete consciousness before hurling myself into Tim's back. He tumbled forwards, the knife in his hand skittering across the kitchen tile. He grabbed my hair and pulled. I kicked his groin. We scrambled and flailed for the weapon like two spoiled children fighting over a toy. A sharp pain radiated through my ribcage as Tim punched me as hard as he could, knocking the wind from my diaphragm just long enough to brush the knife handle with his fingertips. My ears rung and diluted the sound of his nose breaking as I shoved his head into the floor. Chaos reigned over the small section of bloody kitchen floor we inhabited. Tim finally grabbed the knife. The blade tore through my shoulder as my husband swung and stabbed at my flesh, blood warming my cold body even faster than before. Red flashed into my vision, but it wasn't from my cuts or Tim's nose. His cold gray eyes widened as I shoved the strawberry from my pocket as hard as I could down his throat, silencing his screams of rage and grunts of violent effort. I pushed my fingers down as far as they could go. His grip on the knife faltered and I seized the opportunity to steal it, stand, and back away in one not-so-smooth motion. My husband was dying. I watched as he choked and shoved saliva-coated fingers down his throat in an attempt to dislodge the strawberry. His face turned a molten red color and it began to swell. He kicked his feet and flailed on the blood-slippery floor in pain. His eyes now held fear and desperation, not anger. I could have helped him, called the cops, run away, etc., but I didn't. I watched Tim's body drain of life. I watched his chest seize up, deprived of oxygen. I watched his lips turn blue. I watched the veins in his forehead pop. I watched the blood bubble from his nose. I watched his tongue swell and seal the strawberry into his throat. I watched Tim suffer. I watched Tim die. I liked it. The verdict came back, free of charges due to the necessity of my manslaughter. It was self-defense. My lawyer had the easiest job in his career defending me. An escaped murderer leading a double life? And the strawberry? So clever. Plus, I had to protect my younger brother. I was practically a hero. I was happy to continue my life a free woman. No one had to know how much I enjoyed seeing Tim die. But if people did know, they would understand. He lied to me for years. I'll have to be in therapy the rest of my life. Zach will never rest easy again. I did what I had to do to a man who deserved every second of it. With therapy, I came to understand that. A few years after the incident, my therapist recommended I start seeing men again. I had recently become open to the idea. After all, the situation with Tim was such a rarity. It would be shocking for it to happen again, unless I was actively seeking out escaped convicts. Even after the years of therapy, something nagged at me. I liked watching Tim die. I got to watch the life go out of his eyes. I got to live out my obsessions. I got to draw blood, and none of it was my fault. It would never be my fault. So I took my therapist's advice. As I scoured the Seattle police databases for men with violent criminal records, I reactivated my Tinder account. Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed this week's stories. I would love to thank this week's authors, Mac and Sugar Sewed, for their amazing stories. If you have any stories you would like me to read on the show, you can send them to storieswithatwang@gmail.com. You can find the show on Facebook and Instagram at Stories with a Twang Podcast. Don't forget that I'm also posting new episodes of the podcast on YouTube at Stories with a Twang Podcast. It would also mean an awful lot if you could rate and review the show wherever you listen, and don't forget to share with your friends and family. Let me know if you enjoyed this week's episode over on the Facebook page. I hope you all have an amazing week, and remember that a little twang goes a long way.